Hi, everyone. My name's Ken Ehrlich. I am an alumnus of Ohio University and a proud alumnus. I spent 4 wonderful years there, longer ago than any of you who are on this call even have a memory of. But I'm thrilled today because I'm talking to someone that I've worked with a couple of times who's pretty wonderful. She's really an extremely unique artist, and she's chosen a path that I think is really worth talking about, and I think may give you some guidance. It may not, but we'll find out in the next hour. So, Annie Clark, sometimes known as St. Vincent, welcome, and it's really nice to be with you.
Hi, Ken. How's it going?
It's going. It's a relative term now, and that's probably a good place to start. How's it for you?
Well, actually, lockdown has been pretty productive over here. I was able to finish a record and do a lot of do some remixing for other people and start on even another record. So it's been at times incredibly boring. I can't lie, but at other times really really fruitful, and I've been lucky that my immediate family and friends have been okay. So yeah, can't complain.
Yeah. It's got to be interesting. As we talked for a minute before, creative people have special things that they need to deal with things like this. Whether you are creative in a vacuum or whether you're creative in a crowd. And I'm curious, you've experienced both of those things, and how have you dealt with the vacuum part of it particularly?
Well, part of the vacuum made it so that I was able to really, really focus and go really deep on, whether it is getting back into studying Stevie Wonder's harmony, or, going back and listening to certain records and going, wow, this is amazing how they do that. Having an ample amount of time certainly allowed me to kind of go deep. I mean, sometimes, let's be honest, some days I watch Netflix all day. I mean, I can't make it sound like I was completely productive every moment of every day, but as any songwriter or writer will tell you, sometimes the best thing you can do to finish the song is go take a shower.
Mm-hmm. Well, that leads me to a place that I wasn't necessarily going to go right now, but I think it's interesting, your influences, and particularly this past year, Stevie Wonder's chord progressions and harmonies are fascinating. Are there, who for this new project that you're doing that we'll talk about a little bit later, who are the inspirations for that, or and how is that what you've done to head there by listening and by studying?
Yes, I mean the new project that I've been working on, the new record that'll come out later this year, is kind of hearkening back to a lot of records that I've listened to more than any other records in my life. So Stevie Wonder's era from 1971 to 76, this kind of amazing streak he was on with, Talking Books and Intervisions and Fulfilling This First Finale and Songs in the Key of Life. And it was that time.
I have to jump in there. 3 of those won Grammys for Album of the Year. Which,
really?
Yeah. It was before I got there, by the way, but it's the only time that's ever happened in history. And they were, I think there was one year, I think 75, Paul Simon won. I think Still Crazy for All These Years, or one of the Paul Simon solo albums came out, and that won. And I think he said, he was on the show that year, and he said, all I can do is to thank Stevie Wonder for not making an album this year.
I know, exactly. And speaking of, I mean, first of all, incredible records, so obviously deserving of all the Grammys. but it's when you think of it, he was putting out such great music in such quick succession. I mean, and the way that those records were made ostensibly was it really was about a performance, about a moment in time, and about capturing that in the moment and having it live forever. And that's a lot of music for a really short amount of time, and really just so incredibly prolific. And
Intervisions is a double album, I think.
Fulfilling This First Finale is
Well,
the
that's right.
double album. Yes. Mm-hmm.
So, and who else have you been listening to? Who? I won't ask you to compare who reaches those heights, but I'm just curious. Obviously, there are other people that have inspired you over the years.
Absolutely. Again, the kind of people I was digging into was Stevie and Steely Dan and Sly and the Family Stone, War. I mean, really, really, the sound of New York from 1971 to 1976. It's after the idealism of the flower children faded into a wrecked economy and a crazy kind of amount of crime and things like that happening in New York, but it's before disco and punk. So it's this little period where you have people making these really sophisticated, really beautiful records, but they're you don't know that they're so sophisticated. You just know that they sound good, right? You just know that, God, this really moves me. This groove is so heavy. Man, this chorus feels so fresh. Why does it feel so fresh when I get here? And it's because of this like really amazing musicianship and the underpinning of harmony and the understanding of all these things, synthesized into great songs, great pop songs.
Yeah, yeah. It was an incredible period. It really was, and even the disco that followed it, harmonically, musically, Gamble and Huff and Tom Bell and the Philadelphia guys that were right in that pocket, right at the same time. I mean, the music was there. It wasn't a complexity to it, but there was a genius to what all of those people were doing, and a lot of them kind of came out of what Stevie was doing at that time. Yeah. I'm a little, interestingly enough, I did not expect us to go the Stevie Wonder route with you at this point. One of the things that I know about you and I've followed you over the years is that left field world of yours. You took your name from a Nick Cave song about Dylan Thomas dying in a hospital. Your eclectic vision is remarkable, and you've always followed your muse. You've always done that. So you couldn't get much more mainstream than Sly and the Family Stone, Stevie Wonder, that pocket. But obviously, that's the period you're in right now creatively, which is wonderful.
Mm-hmm. And I think one of the things that the only thing you can kind of do as an artist as you go on and make more things and have more experiences, just learn what your intuition is and learn how to follow it. And like you said, just follow the muse where it goes. Because it really is an adventure. You kind of never know where it's going to end up. And but in that same breath, like you have to be voracious. You have to like have all of this, have all these very Catholic ears. I mean, Catholic with a little c, that just can take in everything. Listen to shit you don't like. Listen to everything so that you have it. I think if you have it in your ears, it's going to come out of you one way or the other. At least that's been my experience.
Not to get too cliched here, but these are the things I love to talk about with an artist is roots and where it came from and what you listened to at home and what your parents played for you and things like that. Mm-hmm. And I found that's the commonality, with me, because I'm older than any artist I work with. And we can relate on that level. You want to talk about that for a couple of minutes and, what did you hear around the house?
The stuff I heard around the house was pretty solid boomer mix of music. I mean, like, it was music. It was the Beatles. It was Steely Dan. It was Traffic. It was U2. It was Jethro Tull. Zeppelin to a lesser extent. The Doors. Simon and Garfunkel. The kind of that kind of pantheon of 60s, late 60s, early 70s music. Jimi Hendrix. I remember the first time I heard Jimi Hendrix. The first time I heard Jimi Hendrix was in Forrest Gump, which kind of definitely speaks to the power that music has in film. Certainly. I mean, some of my favorite music from the 90s was soundtracks of, Romeo and Juliet soundtrack or whatever. But I remember hearing Jimi Hendrix for the first time, and it just like electrifying me in a way that I had never experienced before. Michael Jackson. I mean, the list kind of goes on and on, but a really pretty unassailably great stuff. Still, I mean, still it all really, really holds up.
I am hearing more than one mention of guitar players, and obviously that's a big part of your kit. And I think I remember reading one bio or a story or whatever that were you 10 or 11 when you got your first guitar? Is that it, or was it earlier?
Yeah, I was 12 when I got my first guitar.
Yeah. And what did you want to play on that guitar?
I wanted to be Kurt Cobain.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. That was right at that time. Nirvana had just broken into the mainstream. Pearl Jam was, massive early influence. I mean, at one time I owned 43 Pearl Jam CDs. You have to go to Sound Warehouse a lot to get 43 Pearl Jam CDs. It was my prized possession, my prized collection. So when I was growing up, like rock music was really big, and that's music that has guitar in it. I mean, guitar. And so I feel lucky that I kind of came up at a time when the guitar was in the conversation and really a really big part of popular music. I wonder if I came up now, if I would have like gravitated toward a laptop first and being a producer, or making beats or whatever it is. Everyone is really a product of their upbringing and their time. But I'm glad it was guitar, because I really just fell in love with it.
You basically led me to a little astray here as well, because one of the people that you and I share right out of Nirvana is Dave Grohl, who was one of the most wonderful people that I know. And it just hit me, and I hadn't thought about it before. But the two people that first told me about you, the first people, before I had heard you on record, before anything, Dave was one, and Prince was the other. He talked about you. I can't remember exactly when, we had him on shows a little more than other people.
Yeah.
But this had to have been. I had him. We did. What year was? Remember, he did those shows at Staples, and we shot those for a pay-per-view or something. I think that was 2007 or 2008. Is that possible? I don't know. Or it may have been later. I had him on 2012, 13. Maybe that was when he was aware of you. But he really loved your sound. He loved, and again, it was about because he looked at you and saw this kind of difference in you than others. And Grohl just all you got to do is do that. Turn Dave on, and you have to at some point leave the room. But but obviously, and I think what this is leading to is I think. Didn't you induct Nirvana into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, do I remember, or played that, or something?
I did, yeah. First of all, I don't know if you could, if I was if the audience could see me when you were telling me that Prince told you about me, but my jaw was on the floor. I had no idea, and I'm not even sure how to process that information. That's so heavy and cool to me. Dave, the best dude ever. Love him. But yes, in 2014, Nirvana was getting inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And as such, you get other performers to play, the songs of Nirvana. That's just the standard format for Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, right? And oh no, actually, sorry, let me back up. When people get inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, they usually perform, right?
Sometimes yes, sometimes no. They try. Yeah, it varies because some people get inducted and they're not here. So
right, yeah.
I know they try and have the artist play.
So when Nirvana was being inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, they were like, let's get 4 like rad women to do this. That's what Kurt would have wanted. And so I performed with the remaining members of Nirvana, along with Joan Jett also played, Kim Gordon from Sonic Youth played, and Lorde played. And it was so, it's like I still can't believe that. Like the Prince thing, I still can't. That'll take a while to.
Sorry.
No, I'm so happy to know that. Holy cow.
Let's bring you back. Let's talk about a couple of other artists. Your background is fascinating, and again, I relate to it on the basis of how much older I was at the time you were first being exposed to all of that stuff, which is a terrible thing to say, but it's true. Yeah. But it was an extremely fertile period. Music, it was rich and it was loud. Mm-hmm. I loved loud, and we had gone through a soft period. And by the way, I like soft too. I mean, the things that you were listening to at home, I'm sure there was a lot of Carole King and James Taylor in the middle of that too. So
there was James Taylor. For some reason, Carole King slipped through the cracks. She wasn't in rotation at the Clark house.
But obviously, is it a continuing evolution with you musically? Do you continually find yourself changing the things that you like, or are there people that you keep going back to?
There are certainly people who I go back to. And I think that's kind of that's a testament, that's not about me. That's a testament to the fact that the work is so good that you can go back, even if it was made 40 years, 50 years, 100 years earlier, and go, wow. And the great thing about music is that you will never get to the bottom of it. You will never not be a student of music, no matter how old you are, no matter how many songs you've written or whatever it is. It still remains the most mysterious thing in the world. So you don't run any chance of like getting bored, or there's always something to discover, or some for me, I like to sort of figure out why things work, and not to make it about always like deconstructing and then reconstructing. But to me, it's just like, if you can train your ears to go like, God, that bass is really like behind the beat, and what does that do to the feel? Like, wow, that's really interesting. That's really cool. And so one of the things I've done just to figure that out is like take it apart, and like look under the hood and go, why does that chord sound, when you go from this chord to that chord, why does it feel so good? I don't know. They did it. It worked. I'm going to do it too, or whatever it is. So I might have just started riffing there, but you'll always find something really exciting to discover with music. You can never reach the end of it, ever.
I could probably talk to you for hours, or listen to you for hours about all of this, because one of the joys of my life, because I am behind the scenes and I work with an awful lot of people, is sidemen and the classic artists that work with artists. And while you were talking about riffing and talking about a bass line, I was thinking about Jim Jamerson. I was thinking about Bernie Purdy playing behind Aretha, and I was thinking about all these people that if I told you, you'd fall in love with me, and it would be false because it's like, okay, they were but they were part of my life, and that to me, and it's not clinical at all. It's fandom of the largest source. It just comes from there. But obviously, that's why I find myself. We shoot Jazz Fest in New Orleans pretty much every year, and I find myself in a trailer with Bonnie Raitt, or I find myself in a trailer with, years ago with Stevie Ray Vaughan, or this one or that one. And we talk about those people, and we talk about, sometimes we'll talk about things other than music. But the reality is, our common, right now we are on a plane. We're on an incredibly lovely place that, I don't think we always get. And maybe, let's be practical about it. Maybe it's because we've been cooped up in four walls for a year too. That might have something to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's true. I love your sensibility about that, because it is about all of that. It is about so much more than just music and lyrics and notes.
Yeah, it's all about having something to say and using your faculties to the best of your ability to communicate what it is you have to say. When you're talking about Bernard Purdy playing with Aretha, I mean, she has one of the wildest, coolest voices of all time, but she was singing great songs. She had something to say, and that's why we love her.
Yeah. Let's go back to this year for a minute, because I'm curious now. Is there anyone that you discovered this year that maybe wasn't on your radar a year ago until you got locked up?
Yes, actually, a newer artist, a Russian artist named Kate NV, who makes this very interesting. I'm gonna I'll throw out references of things it sort of reminds me of, but that's just reflexive. It is absolutely its own thing, but kind of like Stereo Lab, like post punk, like Tom Tom Club. This really interesting music, and I've become really interested in the music and culture of Russia behind the Iron Curtain. I just think it's really fascinating because one of the things when I was working with David Byrne, I thought about this a lot, where the Talking Heads, for example, they were coming out of punk and coming out of disco and all these things, and it was this big mix of all these really interesting music in New York. But one of the reasons it's so cool is that it's sort of like people who can't really play disco, like kind of playing disco, and or people who aren't like David Byrne doing his like sort of like maniacal street preacher thing, and it's people in some ways like drawing from disparate places and having it channel and funneled through them, and it creates something totally new. So I think that's one of the reasons why I'm interested in Russia Behind the Iron Curtain, because they just get little bits of Western culture, and it would all be kind of devoid of context. And then you see what they make out of it, and it's this totally different thing, because it's a little bit of Western culture meeting this Russian, or post-communist kind of world. So I don't know if that was a tangent, but
no, not at all. So did it find its way into anything you're doing for this new record, this new project?
No, it didn't really.
And it didn't have to.
But it's really fascinating. I just think I like, one of the great things about music is the pollination of ideas, and you go, oh God, you can hear a little Latin something in that, and this is a little bit, don't know. There's a gospel moment or one of those things, and it's one of, I think, probably like food, one of the most natural ways for like a, a cultural exchange.
Ultimately, we're going to get to the 2 times we worked together, but I just keep talking about tangents. When you mentioned the gospel moment, I just flashed on Polyphonic Spree, who I was a huge fan of, and I never got to put them on a show. I tried. They didn't get nominated for a Grammy, or maybe they did, but there was one other show we were talking about, and I almost got them there. I thought it was, again, I mean, I just love what they were. I love the size of it. I love the scope of it. I love voices and horns. I loved, it was like, again, growing up with a kid in the '60s, it was like a distillation of blood, sweat, and tears in Chicago, and all of this on a larger scale. Tell me about that experience. You toured with them for a year?
Yeah, I was. I'm from Dallas, and that's where they're from. And predating the Polyphonic Spree was a band called Tripping Daisy, which was like, they were our local heroes. They made it, bigger than that, but they were like gods in Dallas. And I remember going to see Tripping Daisy when I was, I don't know, 13 or something, at a sweaty club, and being like, wow. So the surviving members of Tripping Daisy created the Polyphonic Spree a few years later, and I used to go see them in when I was later in high school, and it's like 25 people on stage, all in white robes, singing about the sun. And it's like you said, it's like Beach Boys and Sergeant Peppersy, and just all filtered through this like sort of acidy lens. And I used to love to go to those shows, loved it. And so after I dropped out of college and moved back to Texas, back in with my parents in Texas, I was really down on my luck, and I thought, well, I had these big dreams, but here I am back in my childhood bedroom. And then not 2 weeks later did my friend call me. He was already in the Polyphonic Spree, and he said, hey, they're looking for a new guitar player, or an extra guitar player, as if they needed more people in the band. But he said, I told Tim about you, the lead singer. You should come and try out. So I went, and I learned all the songs, and I went and I tried out, and it went well. I thought, okay, I think this is pretty good. And then I was leaving the rehearsal, and the next day I was going to either maybe come back to the rehearsal or not get a call back or whatever. And at the end of that rehearsal, Tim said, Annie, do you have a passport? I said, yep. And he goes, you're going to Europe. And then 2 weeks later, a week later, something, I was in Europe on a bus playing all the biggest festivals. Like it was at that time, it was like Sonic Youth and Polyphonic Spree were on the same kind of touring circuit. So it would be like, I watch Kim and Thurston before my show, and then I get on stage and like sweat it out and like act crazy and get on like stand on a road case, and percussion player would wheel me across the stage and I'd be playing. It just was wild, and it was so fun. And I wish I could do it again. I wish I could. I wish I could just relive some of that stuff.
I saw them a few times out here in California, and it's exactly as you. I think I saw them at the Palladium. I think that's one of the shows.
Uh-huh.
And it was amazing. And interestingly enough, now, and please don't burst my bubble if you can avoid it. I've always thought that's a documentary waiting to happen, or a movie. Maybe it's not a documentary. Maybe it's a real film. Waiting to. I mean, I don't know what happened backstage, off stage, who was with who did what, where, blah blah blah. But it just, if it didn't, it should have.
No, it was a wild time. It really was. I mean, I'm not bursting your bubble. It was wild. It was really, there's a lot of Jägermeister. That's where the Spree taught me about Jägermeister. That's for sure. Just a bunch of rowdy Texans just having a time. It was so fun.
It was in one way it was such a throwback, but on the other hand, they were making it new again.
Mm-hmm.
It was really interesting. So that was that period. One of several transitions that you made in growing. Where did you go from there? That was 2000 and how long was that?
2005.
Yeah,
Yeah,
5 and 6.
that's
Yeah.
why.
Then you made your first album shortly after that, I think. Yeah.
I did. I was actually still in the spree when I started working on my first record, which was called "Marry Me," a reference to a great show called Arrested Development. Yeah, I was working on that solo record. I had a couple people from the spree play on it, and I had "Marry Me" done, but I didn't know how to put it out, or I was kind of navigating all of that. And in the meantime, I got asked by Sufjan Stevens to come and play in his band, which coincidentally was also like a very big ensemble with horns. And he asked if I could play piano well, and I said, uh-huh. Sure can. And I'm sure he regretted that ever since. But no, so I was in his band, and all of a sudden I was playing this like beautifully, kind of perfectly crafted modern American contemporary classical music mixed with like folk songs. And so I remember being like, okay, I play piano on this song, and then I switched to celeste, and then on this one I play guitar, and then on this one I switched to bass, and it was just like this kind of musical chairs. And those shows were so beautiful. The vibe was completely different, but those shows were so beautiful, and also slightly more like a recital. Because I was like sweating the whole time, making sure that I could pull it off. So I was on tour with Sufjan, and one of the members in that band was Bryce Desner from The National, before The National got very big. And they were on a record label called Beggar's Banquet, which is a British label. And so Bryce invited the label to come see the Sufjan show. The label saw me play at the Sufjan show. Oh, because I was opening for him as well. Sorry, it was a real marathon. I would open for him, I get suited up, and then I go play with him. So it was like 3 hours on stage for like 3 hours a night, which is great practice. So they saw me and they signed me because of the performance. And I gave them the record that I had made, and then they put it out, and then I sort of started touring forever. Yeah.
So thank you. You're making my point for me, which I started a little while ago. Sufjan, Polyphonic Spree, Nick Cave, Jack White, David Byrne, Patti Smith, I think is in there somewhere. The Black Keys, obviously. I mean, again, not that they're on the outer fringes of it all. They're all kind of bubbling around, but they all are singular and unique artists that have followed their muses as you have done. Who have I left out?
Oh,
a lot of people.
No, you did a great list. That's a great list.
Well, it's your list. So that's those are the touchstones in your life, as far as I can tell.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, music has given me my whole life.
So where do you go from here with that? I mean, where you obviously want to keep. I'm not going to ask you too much about this new project, because I think it's. I always hate it when that happens, because describing doesn't do anything. But it's just what the direction might be that this new project is headed. Mm-hmm. You told me, didn't you? You did.
I did, yeah. I mean, it's a lot warmer, and it's definitely it's definitely laying in the cut of that early 70s vibe.
A lot of guitar on it.
A lot of guitar. I played so much guitar. So
are there guests on it, or that now I'm treading into forbidden territory?
No, there's no guests. There's not like a feature or anything that. It's a little small, tight little ensemble of great players, and we just played music.
Okay, I have there's a method to my madness because whenever I talk to an artist, I try and figure out at some point or another who I might be able to pair them up with that works. That's what
Yeah.
I've lived off of the bones of all of you artists that sometimes rebel against that, and then ultimately, as in the case of you and Dua Lipa, not just benefit. That's not the object, but enjoy it and and wind up doing something creative. So talk about that for a minute.
Mhm.
That was kind of when we met.
Yeah, that's when we met. Well, I guess the behind the scenes of it was that you came to me and said, "I'm thinking about this, thinking about pairing you up with Dua Lipa. If we did this, what do you think it would look like? Do you have some ideas?" Right? We kind of riffed on ideas together, um, and you uh, you talked about kind of a mashup of songs, and so I went into my studio and I did a quick little mock-up and realized that I could put my song Mass Seduction in the same key as Dua's song One Kiss, and we could kind of do a mashup of those two things and really just rely on the power of not a bunch of like flashing lights or anything in that regard, just rely on the power of our connection and our artistry and our kind of the aspects of us that are like simpatico. And it helped that we both had the same haircut and sort of looked like twins. Fun fact, but we put that performance together, I think, in pretty short order. Do you want to talk about the behind the scenes? I don't want to speak out of turn.
No, it was very quick. It was, and I don't mind saying it. I hope you don't take it the wrong way. It was the last thing I booked on the show that year. Everything else was done. But as soon as the idea took shape, I realized there was not going to be it wasn't going to be like anything else on the show. It was totally its own moment. And I remember it not differently, but I remember when you came in to talk to us about it, you had it laid out already. You didn't have you might not have had you didn't have the notes, but you knew where you wanted to head. And I think the next day was the day that you got together with her, and then the next day you were down with us rehearsing it, and the next day it was on the air. I mean,
Right. Yeah.
it was definitely within the first 4 or 5 days of the show. I think because I know it was when we met at my production office, and then right after that we moved down to Staples.
Oh,
So
yeah.
we're gone. That was yeah. But I remember loving it, and I remember just how generous you were. And I think we found a little clip of the rehearsal, which kind of shows the process a little bit, and you can tell us afterward how far along. I came to the rehearsal. I was knocked out. I was frightened because here was something that I had no idea what it really was gonna be like from the description. But I always trust artists. But if we have that queued up, maybe we should take a look at it, and then afterward we'll talk about it a little, or you can comment on it now.
Great. Yeah, that was really, really fun. And she's a great girl, and she was a real dream to work with. I would say there was like definitely kind of a generosity of spirit between us, and with the whole thing. It was like we both wanted to make each other look as awesome and like tough and as sexy as possible. And yeah, it was so fun. I loved it.
It was great. It was great. The rehearsal was great. The rehearsal was, again, you weren't all dolled up or whatever that word would be today, uh, but just the attitude of it was just the way it was the night that you did it on the show. It was pretty wonderful.
Yeah, we in the rehearsal we weren't yet dolled up in matching Versace outfits,
Yeah,
but we got there.
you did. Totally got there.
Yeah.
So that was the moment, and honestly, that was my introduction to you working together. I obviously had seen you before. And then I think the next year was Prince.
Mm.
That was speaking about electrifying performances. And I know, and I don't think you mind if I said it, but I want you to talk about it. I think you were scared. I think you were. I don't want to say scared, but I think you were nervous about performing a Prince song on a TV show.
Yeah.
To talk about your relationship with him a little, because I think it's fascinating.
Well, my relationship with him is that I love and idolize him, and so I felt it's a that's a and he is so singular. So it was an interesting needle to thread to figure out how to cover a Prince song with Prince's band, do it justice, put your own spin on it, but also honor the legacy. So for me, it was like a real puzzle I sort of had to figure out. It's like, how do I? Nobody can do Prince. You can do yourself doing Prince, but you can't do Prince. So um, yeah, it was. It was definitely an intimidating ask, but it was obviously really fun. I'm really glad I did it. My one anecdote about Prince is that I was starting a tour for my self-titled record, and I started it in New York, which is never a good idea. You want to start your tours in Omaha, and by the time everybody's hot, then you roll into New York, Chicago, LA. But anyway, we started in New York, and I was about to take the stage, and then I sort of saw some like hustle bustle at this one venue called Terminal 5, and from the stage, like there's a kind of a crow's nest, and so it's a place where if you're on the stage and you look up, you can see into it, but the audience can't see what you're saying, right? So there's some hubbub before I go on stage, and I don't really think too much about it. I kind of get on stage and do my thing, and then somewhere around the third song, I look up, and Prince is watching from the crow's nest, and I was like, "Shit." If you want to know my honest thought, I was like, "Oh dang!" I was just I I mean, I definitely like dug deep and, did my moves and did the best show I absolutely could have possibly done at the time. But I was thinking to myself, I wish I'd seen that at the end of the show. I wish I'd known Prince was here way later. Tell me after. But I was told that he doesn't usually stay past a song or two, but he stayed for my whole show and just left right before the encore. So I was like, oh, okay, I passed the Prince test. But that's my anecdote about Prince.
Did you meet him? Did you ever work with him? I don't know.
No, I never met him. I never worked with him. He passed before I was able to be in the same room with him or have the opportunity to actually meet.
Well, now I'm going to take your breath away again with a little more Prince thing. As I was saying before, that when you came in and had that medley, that mashup laid out, basically when I first saw you, the year that I opened the show with Prince and Beyonce, and it was this medley. I'll tell you try and do the nickel version. I would ask him pretty much every year to come and do the Grammys, and most years he would just say no to me.
Yeah.
And one year he called me and he said, I'll do the show if I can be with Beyonce. So you get me with Beyonce, I'm coming. So I made the call, and it was kind of well received, but it was not unanimous. Anyway, so I called him back and I said, I think we've got this, blah, blah, blah. And he said, okay, I'll talk to you soon. And the next day, this is the truth, probably our mutual friend David Wild knows the story well because he came with me. We went out to the rehearsal hall that we always rehearsed at in Burbank. He called and said, "Would you please come out? I want to play you something." This is the next day now. This is not 3 days later, not a week later. We go out and he brings us into the studio and he had the band there. And he says, he didn't say much. He just said, "Sit over there," whatever. And he played down the whole medley. He had written the whole thing out. The band knew it in 24 hours. And he did finish in one of these rare moments where he kind of let his hair down a little bit. He went like, "Ta-da!" Look. I did it, didn't I? And obviously, and that's what it was. I mean, he was definitely, as people know him as other artists, Svengali's. He was her Svengali on that performance. She just walked. She fit into what he had done. That was, my point is, you reminded me of that when you came in and you said, "Okay, I have an idea, blah, 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 blah." And at that point, I knew it was going to be great. I really did. So, okay, let's talk about, sorry, see, you didn't tear up anyway. That's good. So,
dark glasses. You can't.
I think most of the people, I was going to say kids, but they probably would like that, watching this are in some form or another of heading toward a career in music one way or another. And that's the reason that I think both of us are here. I don't think they booked us for our radiological backgrounds or whatever. So you went to Berkeley. I don't know how long you were at Berkeley, but you were there. Did you, sorry?
About 3 years I was at Berkeley.
So talk about the value of an education, because that's what these kids are questioning right now, especially when they're watching this, because they will have been home for almost a year or more. What we talk about your educational experience and the value that you got from a formal music education and versus a life education.
I had a little bit of a combo platter of life and school. My aunt and uncle are a jazz duo called Tuck and Patty, and they took me out on tour with them when I was 15. So I had some real life experience of being a roadie and seeing what touring was like, and kind of seeing how, like, okay, so you somebody books you a show, and then you show up to the venue and you sound check. I mean, all of these little things that sound kind of boring to say out loud. I mean, they were thrilling to me, but they can sound kind of just nuts and bolts. What my aunt and uncle impressed upon me was that you have to know your craft inside and out. Like, you have to know, your gear. You need to know, about sound. Like, you need to be able to listen to a music and be able to pick out the frequencies and know which frequencies align with which notes. And you got to be bad. Like, you got to be, you have to work harder than you could possibly imagine. And so all of that stuff was really impressed upon me luckily from a close family source before I went to music college. And I had learned at college, I mean, I definitely learned some fundamentals of harmony that I basically learned a language for what my ears were already hearing. And I learned how to be able to communicate better to other musicians in that particular language. I learned a language. And by that time I was recording myself on Pro Tools. So I was learning, I learned about engineering to a certain extent, or at least how to record myself. gosh, I'm struggling. You have to know your craft inside and out, is what I would say, and you got to know, like, I think it helps to have a little bit of knowledge about every aspect of it, so that you can, one, communicate with people, but two, have like a respect for what people do on a team, say on the road. Know what your monitor person does, like, appreciate them, or your front of house person, or all these things. It kind of helps to have done the grunt work, to be glad that you don't have to do the grunt work anymore.
But didn't you do a lot of that when you were with your aunt and uncle? I mean,
Yeah.
that's there's no question that that's the best. That's ultimately what's going to prepare you best. I think what I found. I went to journalism school. I went to Ohio U, where we're,
Yeah.
and all I want, and those I wanted to be a sports writer. My mother very wisely said, this journalism thing might not be around forever, so maybe you ought to figure something else out. But I know that book learning was pretty valuable, because it taught me that it did, like, it's really what you said. It taught me the techniques. It taught me the jargon. It taught me the language of it all. But there ain't nothing like getting out and doing it, because that ultimately is what it is.
Yeah, it is. I mean, and there's kind of nothing like playing shows to make you good at playing shows. Um, Luckily, there weren't, uh, social media was not as prevalent, and there were not cameras in phones yet when I was playing a lot of really embarrassing gigs. So I'm glad that the sort of I got to predate some of the more horrific um, experiences. At least they weren't captured. Um, yeah, I think craft can help you when um, inspiration is falling short. Craft can certainly help you, but I mean, you know, I, I was so wild and just so very much wanted to be playing music however, that I made up a fake booking agency. I pretended to be my own agent in order to book shows for myself in coffee shops. Like, that's a crazy person, but that's what it.
It's all part of it. It is all.
Yeah.
So I probably the hardest thing I want to ask you will come in 1 second. But as another aside, because I've done it all this whole last hour, I knew Tuck and Patty. I did a show in one of the early shows that I did was a cable show for Showtime called Showtime Coast to Coast. And the idea of the show was we would go out to different places and record. I don't remember where I had them. It was in a club somewhere. It could have been in Boston. It could have been somewhere. But I had been following them, and I really thought they were great. And they were two of the nicest people I ever met. They just
Yeah.
really. But I don't want to linger there. I want to ask you the tough question.
Mhm.
Question that I was thinking about while you were talking and struggling a little bit.
Mhm.
Um, what if you want to be an artist, but you don't really have it to be an artist, but you love music and you want to be in this business, and maybe you should think a little more about if this is what people.
Mhm.
Maybe I should be an engineer. Maybe I should be maybe I got to start carrying coffee. Maybe I start taking notes. I got to be a production assistant. I got to do this. I got to do that. What do you have to say to people who are, and I don't mean this, Jesus, sounds terrible, who probably aren't ever going to have a record deal, or if they, or be signed, or, but they love this. This is what they want to do for their lives. I think
Mhm.
a lot of kids, I will say, kids watching this now, that may not know that that's where they are, but maybe they'll start thinking about
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of jobs in music that are not necessarily being a front person. There's a lot. I mean, there are people who don't want to be a front person at all, but write great songs and write great songs behind the scenes for other people who do want to be performers. I mean, one of my favorite things about what we do, and you're the master of this, is like putting a project together and figuring out, okay, these are the people I need to make this whole vision come to life. And those people are producers. Those people are agents. Those people are people who help get shows up and running. Maybe they're on the logistical side, and they're calling lighting cues. There's a whole lot of stuff you can do around music that isn't just like, it's not like be Jimi Hendrix or bust. There's a lot you can do.
And a lot of those people, I mean, I really shouldn't generalize, but they get the same psychic joy from what they do as you do, standing out in front with sound and lights.
Mhm.
I think that's the wonderful thing about it. I am maybe just a little more heightened version of that, but I know the joy that I get from working with people like you, and that's really at the end of the day what we do it for.
Mhm.
You
Well,
know?
yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that your question reminded me of watching a Fran Lebowitz documentary, where she says that a lot when she's walking down the street in New York. She's a humorist and kind of old school New Yorker, I guess. What the question that she gets from a lot of young people is, Fran, what should I be when I grow up? And the question really is, what kind of artist should I be? And I heard that and I thought, that's so funny. If you have to ask, you probably shouldn't be an artist. Like, if you're debating whether you ought to be a writer, and I don't mean this in a harsh way, but if you want to be an artist, you kind of don't have a plan B. And that is um that does take like a really kind of wonderful delusion. I like to think of it as like a really wonderful delusion that can propel you to do things that you might not have done, because you have this like unbelievable belief in the fact that you will get there one step at a time. Um, but yeah, I thought that was funny. It's like, if you have to ask what kind of artist you should be, maybe figure something else out.
Well, the one thing about that I do know about being a producer is that there are time limits, and we're running out. We're done now. Uh, but I want to thank you so much. You've been so lovely to talk to, and I think it is about, there is this commonality. I think the people that are watching this, the kids that are, you know that's what really connects us, and it is the love of music and our desire to just keep doing the things we do. And I got it. So I wish you well. I can't wait to hear this new project. We never got to the film you're in that will be coming out this year too, but
TBD. Yeah.
it's really been lovely talking to you, and I'm sure the kids watching have gotten a lot out of it.
Great. Ken, thank you for having me. This was really fun. And yeah, I hope people see this and we get to talk to them in a few years when they're in the game.
It'd be great.
Yeah.
Thank you, Annie. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Ken.
We'll see you hopefully on a stage somewhere soon.
Oh, I look forward to it.